Hello again. Within my working life, I have had the extreme displeasure of having to go through a couple corporate training exercises. These are the kinds of things where we don't think you're doing your job well enough, so we're going to have you stop doing your job and fall behind in it so that we can teach you how to better do your job. And of course, nothing we tell you is going to apply. Like I said, I've been through, I think, three of these total, and two of them mention the daisy. Now, the daisy, they will show you a picture, looks something like this. And they will tell you, this is a wheelbarrow. What do you think of this design? And of course, we look at it and we say that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, because that would make a very stupid wheelbarrow. And, well, why do you think that? And blah, 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 and all the other corporate stuff. And then they tell us the big, big secret. This is something called a daisy. I'm assuming it's short for upsy daisy, because this goes up walls. And you look at it and it makes sense, this little piece here would fit into a tract of some sort, and the wheel would be against the wall, and a motor would pull this up, and you could lift things up and down the wall. Makes perfect sense when you explain it that way. And even a few people in the audience sort of, oh yeah, I've heard of that, blah. I think they were plants, but anyway. Now here's my problem with this. Well, that sounds like a good idea. We got this big block attached to the wheel down here. And that's going to get in the way, and that's going to drag against the wall. That's going to cause all sorts of problems. That's not a block. That's the ground. So you got your wheelbarrow. You got it sitting on the ground because it's supposed to be pushed against the ground. No, it's not. It doesn't get pushed along the ground. It gets pulled up the wall. Okay, so then why didn't you make your original picture look something a little more like that and have the wall on it? And this wall goes up and down, and it goes up and down the wall, and that makes perfect sense, and there's no ground there, and now it looks like a good design. But you had to put the ground in the original picture. And putting the ground there, it misled me into believing this is supposed to be pushed along the ground. And there we get into the rub of the whole situation. In order to make their point, this is about thinking outside the box and, don't make assumptions and stuff like that. In order for them to convince me that this is a bad design, or get me to say it's a bad design to begin with, they had to give me false information. They had to put the ground in the picture and allow me to assume it gets pushed along the ground instead of putting the wall in the picture, where I might look at it and say, that goes up and down the wall. I've never heard of a daisy before any of these sessions, but and again, I've seen this in two different training courses, and I forgot it between the two because it's such a bad example. But in order to get me to think wrongly about it, they have to put false ideas in my mind. So I gotta wonder, do they actually make their point if they have to deceive you into thinking the wrong way in order to tell you you're thinking the wrong way? Now, this is what the initial picture looks like. Every other picture, because at the end of the day we're going to have a slideshow we're going to review, and then tomorrow we're going to talk about something else, but remember what we learned with the daisy and all that. Every other slide that came up was like this. They took the ground out. So the only time they put the ground in the picture was when they wanted us to assume that this goes along the ground. Because, again, in order to make their point, they had to deceive us. Which brings up the question, were they really making a good point or not? I mean, if you have to deceive someone in order to tell them, oh, you're thinking wrong, well, of course I'm thinking wrong, you deceived me. Now, we asked a lot of people about the daisy, and only one group thought it was a good idea. They tell us this after they tell us it goes up and down walls. Children. And yes, so we're supposed to believe now that children, they don't have the preconceived notions that adults have, etc., etc. So, they take a lot more on faith than adults do at times. And so children understood right away that this is a good design. And we have quotes from children, and here's where again I think they're starting to get deceptive, because the quotes they give by children don't sound like the way children talk, in my opinion. Ooh, this is a really good thing, and you can push it along and pull a string or something, and the stuff falls out of it, and there's no string in the picture. That was an actual quote or a paraphrase of a quote that a kid actually said. There's no string in the picture, nothing like that. And again, it's using language that, these are supposedly 5 and 6 year old kids, and it's using basically language that adults would use trying to sound like children. So I entirely doubt that their quotes by children are legitimate even. Now, ask 100 children, maybe 3 or 4 of them will give these semi-comprehensible question or answers that you can rephrase slightly to look better. I'll give you that much, maybe, yes. But there's another problem with these children. They all thought it was a great design. Nothing that these children said let us understood that this was supposed to go up and down a wall. So they're saying it's a good wheelbarrow because they're trying to please the adults in the room. And they don't understand why it would work as a wheelbarrow if it did. Because, everything the kids write, they still assume that it's pushed along the ground, not that it goes up and down the side of the wall. So the children experts that you're bringing in are no better off than the rest of us. In fact, possible that they're just trying to please the adult in the room by acting like they understand how it works. Whereas the adults look at it and say, no, that won't work because it doesn't look like it should work. I could show children pictures of a spaceship that I designed, and they would think it's cool and want to take a ride in it. Does that mean my spaceship design would actually work? No. I'm not an aeronautical engineer or anything like that, and definitely not any kind of engineer. So if I ever try to talk you into funding my spaceship, say no, because it's not going to work. I can tell you that in advance. But little kids would think it would. So saying little kids think this is great design, that really doesn't say much about whether it's a great design or not, because little kids don't really know designing as well as we think they should. So that's sort of my rant for the day is, we got these corporate training exercise full of BS that they try to push on us. Now at the end of the course, they always have you evaluate the course, and you give us a chance to say what we think about it. And I do, honestly. And of course, my honesty always gets people thinking, well, you just don't want to think outside the box and blah, 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 blah. That's true, but see, this is what you really want on your team. You want someone who can spot the BS and say, this doesn't work. And isn't going to just nod his head and go for a paycheck. When outsiders come to our office and they want us to do something for them and they start to feed us all this false information, you want me there to say, no, this isn't working. You're lying to us. Unfortunately for you, I don't just turn this off. So when you turn around and start lying to us employees, it's still going. And I know you're trying to BS us with a daisy. Now, like I said, people in the audience, after they say this goes up and down the side of a building, people in the audience, oh yeah, I've heard of that. And again, sometimes I think they're plants. So I decided actually, as I was drawing my little picture here, went on the internet and tried to find the daisy. And I looked up all sorts of things. I looked up construction daisy because it goes up and down the side of a building. I looked up, goes up and down the side of a building. I looked up, lift, I looked up wall lift, I looked up corporate daisy because, like I said, I've seen this in 2 corporate training exercises, so I figured maybe someone would have something on there. Um, all sorts of things. Tried Upsy Daisy because, like I said, I think that's where the daisy got its name. Found there is a harness used for lifting cows called an Upsy Daisy. Looks nothing like this, but it exists. So now I'm at the point where, yes, as something that goes up and down walls, this will make sense. I'm still not convinced that it actually exists because I tried to find it on the internet and I can't. Maybe I'm looking under the wrong search. Maybe I don't know. Got the wrong name for it. And it would work for that purpose, but I still don't have reason to believe it exists. It definitely doesn't exist for the reason that the corporate trainers want. That is to deceive us into believing it works one way so they can tell us we're wrong. Because that's sort of the whole point coming out of all this is if you have to lie to someone in order to point out that they're wrong in the first place, then maybe the lesson you're trying to teach them isn't a valid lesson. And like a lot of corporate training exercises I've been through, the daisy is definitely not a legitimate lesson. And so that's it. I just thought I'd give you a little ammunition you could use if you ever run into a daisy in any of your training exercises. Had time to think about this after the fact and develop. Otherwise I would have confronted them during the course, but couldn't have done that because I didn't have time to think through and realize, wait a second, this block here, it was in the first slide you showed us, it wasn't in any other slide you showed us, so you were trying to deceive this about the ground here. Didn't have time to analyze it and think it through and embarrass them in public like I should, wish I did in the past. But now you do. You have the facts. If you ever see one of these in the corporate training, you know it's coming. You know that they're lying to you. Have fun making fun of them. And have a nice day.